Alrighty, my name is Gina Alexandris. I am delighted to be here with all of you. You have my card in the bags. I am currently a coach and professional development consultant. Before that, I spent about 25, almost 30 years in legal education and the practice of law. I was practicing family law and civil litigation for about 4 years. I then moved to Osgoode to start the career office and to start the, you have my bios though, so I shouldn't be repeating this. I just realized that, so I don't need to describe who I am to you. What we're here to talk about is planning and running strategic planning retreats. And what I want to know, first off, is how many of you have had the responsibility of putting together a strategic planning retreat yourselves? I see a couple of hands. How many? Not sure if it was your responsibility or not. I see a waving hand.
Or whether it was really real.
Or whether it was... Boy, there's a question right there, but let's hold off on it for a second. How many of you then, so there are about 3 of you, or 2.5 of you, who had planned a retreat. How many of you have attended a strategic planning retreat? Okay, so there's a few of you. Let me ask you, for those who had planned or who had attended, what were a couple of the things that particularly worked well, and or what were the couple of things that you never ever want to see, experience, or do again? So either of them, you can choose either of them. Yes? Stay focused on the issues you want to talk about. Okay. At the retreat that you went to, did you or did you not stay focused? You did. Okay, that's important. What else? Worked or didn't work? Yes.
Worked. Just having the right mix of people in the room.
The right mix of people in the room. And by that, what do you mean?
So for my organization, it was the board of the day, so the board of trustees, and we brought in some past presidents, other people who we felt could give us the advice and the direction we needed, not necessarily from inside, but also from outside, so you have a broader view and other viewpoints to put into the mix.
So having the right people around the table, around the area, both internal and external, with different voices to contribute. Anything else that worked well or didn't work well?
The opportunity to think big and not have limits on conversation.
The opportunity to think big. So I found this quote, and I just wanted to share it with everybody. A mind that is stretched by new experience can never go back to its old dimensions. And I just thought it had a very appropriate theme for strategic planning, because thinking big, thinking differently, thinking wide is one of the reasons why we engage in strategic planning. And so it's important to be able to offer that opportunity and to think about the scenario as we're moving forward for strategic planning. Before we go into the, I'm going to spend sort of time on the before, during, and after, because those are the 3 things that I really want us to take away from this particular session, is the ability to think about planning a retreat beforehand, what you do on the day of that can make a difference or not, and then what happens afterwards, because we sometimes get to step 1 and 2 and then forget step 3, and it's a really concrete step that we need. But the purpose of strategic planning, you've been tasked with, or you want to have a strategic planning meeting. What's the reason for it? Why would you be having a strategic planning meeting? What are some of the things that you want to engage people with at this kind of a retreat? What are some of the themes or focus, for example?
Well, it's some of the trajectories is the aim that we're taking, or we want to lead the organization. What path are we leading the organization? What efforts or what new initiatives can we take?
So the direction, the aim, the goals, the new initiatives of an organization, looking forward, and sometimes it's a long-term timeline, and other times it might be a 1 or 2 year timeline. How long was yours?
We focused on, the longest we focused on it was 4 years.
4 years.
But typically it's 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so 2 to 3 or 4 years being at the longest time. What else happens during a strategic planning retreat, or can happen during a strategic planning retreat, as part of the expectation or expected goal? Just curious what other reasons that you might have seen or experienced.
Well, just social time and growing together.
So it really is a chance, and one of the best parts of planning a retreat is to get people out of the office, out of their normal habits, out of their normal experiences and commitments, away from the distractions, and being able to get people engaging together. So as you're thinking about a retreat, being able to keep that goal in mind, I think, is really critical. And it depends, for example, if the retreat includes new team members or new leadership, and it's a redirection of mission potentially. You want to be able to have the opportunity for people to engage, for people to experience the conversation differently and together. At the previous session, a woman said, well, one of the best things that they did was actually have a walking part to the meeting, something that, away from the desks, the round tables, away from sofas or chairs, and having things done in a different way. But being able to engage with your colleagues or leadership or others is really important as part of the strategic planning. And hopefully one of the takeaways, apart from thinking big and meeting people, you might actually also engage in learning new skills, learning new items, updates that might be part of the strategic planning retreat as you're thinking about what the longer term plans might be. I want to read, and for this I'm going to need glasses, I'm going to read a quote for a definition of strategic that I thought was really helpful for us to keep in mind as a anchor for what we're talking about this afternoon. It is afternoon. The strategic theme. So this is from the Clifton Strengths Assessment. Has anybody ever done Gallup? I see some smiles. Clifton Strengths Assessment. Has anybody? I see a couple here. So it's an assessment tool that can be used to see some of the things that that are particularly part of your ability group, and things that you might not have as a strong suit necessarily. But one of the themes that they have is strategic, and out of all the definitions of strategic, strategy, this is one that I really resonated with. And it says, strategic theme enables you to sort through the clutter and find the best route. To the conversation that happened earlier, being able to sort through the day-to-day noise, being able to sort through all the activities that might be happening and find the best route. The perspective allows you to see patterns where others simply see complexity. Mindful of these patterns, you play out alternative scenarios, asking, what if this happened? And what if that happened? The recurring question helps you see around the next corner, whether it's a year, 2 years, or 4 years, and you can evaluate accurately potential obstacles. Guided by where you see each path leading, you start to make selections. So part of the conversation and the strategy discussion is to throw up opportunities, think big, think about what works, what doesn't work, and then start to make potential choices as you come through. And so the theme works like this. What if, thinking about the questions, select, choose your path, and then strike, execute. So strategy, when you're thinking about a retreat for strategic discussions, really is intended for the purposes of letting go of the day-to-day emails, letting go of the day-to-day conversations that you're having, and thinking differently. But one of the most important parts that people miss is the planning ahead of time. For those who have had to plan, and I'm including the person who said so-so, how much time did you have to plan your retreat?
We do it every 5 years
Mm-hmm.
for the CCLA, and I probably would have started it about 6 months prior.
Okay, I'm glad to hear. I see a smile. Less time, more time?
Probably more like a month to 2
Okay.
months.
It's interesting because in the previous session I heard a month as well, and that just puts a lot of pressure. I'm so pleased to hear 6 months, because a minimum of 2 to 4 months is what you want to have for proper planning. So kudos to you, my hat's off to you for appropriate planning ahead of time. And really remember, being able to get people outside of the office and organize the day or days as you need to get thinking about things really takes some identification in the beginning. So what are some of the things you're thinking of ahead of time? Identify the purpose. What is it that you want to get done? What are the themes? What are the activities? What are the essential elements of the day or days that you're planning? Pick a date, and it sounds so trite, but you might have to consult with a few people a few times before you pick a date. Look at other calendars. Is FOLA having its annual conference as well, and is it going to cause an issue? Is the president or the chair of the organization out on holiday and not going to be able to attend? You want to make sure the key people that you want there are there, and give them enough time to clear their schedule ultimately, and be able to ensure that that is in place. It sounds so trite, but that has been a hiccup for so many different organizations in terms of getting a date. Allow enough time and allow enough resources and budgeting. And one of the things that we forget when we're dealing with strategic planning processes and retreats is that you should allocate a budget. And I'm looking at the two of you who have created. Do you have a separate line item or budget for the retreats? I see a yes for sure, and okay, I see a yes there as well. One of the things that you then also need to do is designate somebody, whether it's internal, a committee, a designated person, or an external facilitator. make sure that you have somebody who's thinking about the retreat ahead. And it sounds like you do this for your organization. So I don't know if you're the lead go-to or the only person, if it's a committee. Can I ask how, or do you have external people coming in as well?
No, I basically planned it and then I also facilitated.
Wow. Okay.
We have external facilitators.
Okay. And external facilitators? Others who've been at retreats, external, internal? How has it worked? External. So let me ask about the pros and cons, because kudos to you. You obviously like strategy. I get the sense that you do like strategy. But one of the benefits of having an external potentially is that the person's not committed to any of the results, right? They are neutral. They are completely outside of your organization, and therefore they can ask some tough questions that you may or may not. You may be able to ask a tough question, but being internal might not allow everybody internally to feel comfortable speaking. So sometimes an external speaker can help. I'm curious with the externals. I think the gentleman, I don't know his name, if you want to nudge him. You talked about it external. How did it work? And I'll talk to that in a second. How did that external provider work?
It worked great. The facilitators that we used, they were so just to be precise, the strategic planning of the retreats that we've had is through with FOLA is on the board. And the external facilitators that we've had, they're previous FOLA chairs who have not been chair for quite some time, but they were of great assistance. Again, they were impartial. They just didn't care to say it the way it is.
Yeah. Okay, so not somebody who's involved, who's got a key day-to-day responsibility now, but somebody who's familiar with the group. Okay. The two of you, I think, mentioned external facilitators. What was that, pro or con for each of you?
I think it gives a person a fresh perspective if they're external and they don't come with any biases or preconceived notions. So that's a plus. On the minus side, I think there can be a disconnect with the organizational culture because they're too far removed from the organization. So we picked up on that.
Fair enough. And I wonder how much conversation happened beforehand so the facilitator can learn about the culture and engage in that given way potentially, right? So sometimes that planning phase, even for the facilitator, might not have been sufficient or as in-depth as necessary. How about from your perspective?
Yeah, mostly positive.
Okay.
I think it's good to let people that are on the team or whoever's involved be able to think and have that person organize and, manage ideas and organize them and wordsmith without you having to be a part of that process. You can really more think about concepts and, goals.
So being able to be a fully engaged participant. So let me ask the question from the person who is organizing and facilitating. Do you feel that you can be as engaged in the process as you're facilitating? And how do you do that? Just to...
I felt I was able to do that.
Okay.
I think knowing the organization, knowing the players, but also setting the ground rules in the room. Whether it was a board member or president or staff, part of the staff team, everybody sort of was equal around the table. So you're free to speak, and it worked in my setting.
Okay.
And we've done it twice, and it's been successful.
Good.
So
I'm glad to hear it. So
it worked well, but I've had both, and I think it depends on the organization, level of comfort, skill sets, and there's lots of benefits for bringing external facilitators.
And it can be done both ways, but I think you need to know the culture, as you said, you need to know the team, you need to know the focus that you're having, and you need to know your own, if you're the person organizing, you need to know your own strengths. Maybe you are doing the organizing, but maybe you're not facilitating, because that might not be, or maybe you want to participate so actively that you need to take a step back from being the facilitator, for example. So again, it could be done either way, but just planning that ahead of time and understanding it. Selecting your offsite location, and I say offsite, I intentionally put the word offsite, because sometimes it has to be done nearby or on site, I get it, but ideally to get people out of their comfort zone, to get people away from the distractions that we have, getting it off-site usually is ideal. If you're going to have a virtual retreat, and I hope that now we can get back to having in-person retreats, if you're going to have a virtual retreat, there are different platforms. Did anybody have a strategic planning retreat on a technological platform in the last couple of years? Or did you just bypass retreats altogether?
We did in person last year.
Good for you. Okay, all right. So in person, and so the reason I'm asking this is because if you're going to have it, if you have people from too far away and they're not all going to come together, if you're going to do it using technology, check out some of the different platforms that are available for meetings, conferences, retreats. Some are far better than others. Having just a Zoom meeting is probably not the way that you want to go for a retreat. There's different computer programs or software programs that allow you to engage differently than just Zoom and Breakout. Not that I'm a big fan of Zoom and Breakouts, but for this purpose it might be something different. And go and see it. Go and visit it. Go and check out the venue before you commit to it.
Sorry, do you have suggestions for some of these software programs?
I can get those to you, yeah, because there were about 3 in particular that we reviewed for a couple of sessions. So I'll get those to you, the names and got them. Let me have your card, or if you can send me an email. Thank you.
Do you find that it conflicts with the idea of like taking people out of their...
Yeah, so does it conflict with taking people out of their environments? I'm not suggesting that it's the ideal. Ideally, for a strategic planning session, I think you want to have people together, in an area together. But where it might not be possible because they're too far and budgets might not allow for it, being able to have at least most people are on Zoom or Teams, and so having a different platform that has a table or has a coffee table, even though you're in the same room, your bedroom, your laundry room, wherever you're doing your meetings from, it does feel different, and the engagement will be different with some of these sessions. Okay, so with the pre-work still, we're still in the pre-work. If there is research that has to be done, interviews that have to be done, collecting of data. So take a look, and I'm pointing to you only because you've done both of you have done the retreats recently. What was the history of the organization? What's happened? What hasn't happened? Collect the data and the information you need that will facilitate the conversation. One of the ways to get input is to have either interviews or surveys ahead of time so that people have a sense of what they're talking about at the retreat and can give anonymous input if they need to. And that would help you with what you're going to be bringing forward at the conversation at the actual retreat. Take a look at, especially if you're thinking about doing a strategy conversation, the mission, the goals, think about in advance and ask people to think about what the strengths, the SWOT. I'm going to use SWOT or SPOT. I recently saw SPOT. Strengths, problems, opportunities, and threats, because if you don't like SWOT, SPOT is an alternative that you can use right now. But think about it ahead of time and get people thinking about what those might be of the organization so they can come prepared to the session. And we all know what happens. You send out 10 emails, 2 will get read, sort of, 1 won't get, maybe the titles will get skimmed, but at least give people the opportunity to prepare ahead of time. Create a relevant and thoughtful agenda. I can't overemphasize how important the agendas to those days or day is in terms of the success of the event. When you know what the purpose is, be able to thoughtfully allow for enough time for both the thinking, the substantive thinking, but also the people getting together, right? The activities that you want to do. Be thoughtful of that and the transition times. It was until about 10 years ago that I had never even thought about transition times and you might all be way ahead of me, but transition times on agendas to allow people to get to and from locations. My agendas used to be 9, 9:30, 10, 10:30, until somebody said, whoa, it takes 2 minutes to walk across, add 5 minutes in. And I thought, no, I can't, it's too much good content. But no, you need time in between. So being able to thoughtfully think about what the person's experience is going to be is really, really important. And then be inclusive in the programming. If you alone are the person creating the agenda or thinking about the day, get input from people. You may not realize that venue is inaccessible to somebody for ABC reasons. You may not realize that theme is one that might not be appropriate to have as a conversation, or you might have to think about it a little bit differently. Or just in terms of the inclusivity, people will be more vested if they've had engagement in the planning process ahead of time. So being inclusive in the planning, both in terms of voices and experiences, is, I think, critical as you're planning. We've got 10 minutes and I'm going to get through this. We get to retreat day. The other one was 20 minutes, so this one is good with a full 30 minutes. Retreat days. You've arrived, your team's arrived, ensuring the space is appropriately set up, whether that's virtually or in person. I can't overemphasize the need to think about technology, temperature, And for anybody who's gone to conferences, and I'm going to look at the women in particular, temperatures never are right? It's either too hot or too warm. And how many of you have shawls or something in your bags, right? Just in case it gets too cold or too warm. But in any event, thinking about these activities or these situations, I think, ahead of time. Meals. Part of the day has to be allotted to meals and food and beverages. Caffeine, if you so need. Snacks. Healthy snacks, treats, whatever the case might be. But think about what you're doing. If you're putting a menu item together that is pasta and heavy carbs for lunch, and then you're going into a let's plan the next 3 years session right after, you are not going to get a lot of involvement. You're not going to get a lot of engagement. People are going to be asleep. I see it. What's that? May I ask what the smile is for from sharing? Or
It's true.
Right? So, you might have that, shift the agenda a little bit, either do that thinking beforehand or make it a lighter meal if you're going to have that kind of a heavy conversation, and then plan for snacks right after that conversation. So you really want to think through the meal portion and the hydration portion as well. And it's one of the reasons why I did add chocolate, because chocolate is important for those who are inclined to have chocolate. In your agenda and for the days, include what I forgot to start off with was, and I think that you said it at the very beginning, start off with ground rules, right? At the very beginning, start off with a conversation about what the expectations are amongst us as a group. We didn't do this here because we had a limited time together, but in most of my meetings I will start off with a conversation about what the expectations are around the table, what the expectations are among the group, the respect that we want to show one another, the ability to have your say, to speak up, and some things such as phones are off the table or laptops are off the table or whatever the case might be. But if you're going to have a no technology rule, allow for it in the agenda. So in the agenda, have a technology break, a people break, and a health break for that matter. So that, imagine if you can't have technology in your hands for 2 hours or 3 hours or even an hour. People, I see one person saying, yeah, okay, right? No. No, I was, your colleague's face. Your colleague's face was saying, yep. And that's why also in those bags there are fidget toys, because if people cannot touch their phones, they're going to need something to play, right?
I was wondering why, and I said, I bet she put this in there because
there's a reason. There is a reason. If you're not going to be looking at your phone or doing something else. So I like the happy faces because I think part of retreats are to be energizing, but I also think having that the stress ball, or I don't like calling it a stress ball, it's just a happy face ball, because it's a fidget toy, and there's all sorts of different fidget toys that you can get. But I think being able to acknowledge that and lead that as a rule at the very beginning is really important as you go through the day. Determine what information you need to distribute during the day and have it there available. The last thing you want is to have to be making photocopies or find a photocopier or a printer to be able to get things to people in advance. So keep that in mind. And one of the things that I've put up here is about getting the creativity flowing during the day. I was going to have a slide here that included yoga poses, men and women in yoga poses. And I thought, lawyers, law-related professionals don't really want to spend a day doing yoga. Some might admit to it. Well, okay, see, I'm glad you have that reaction, right? You just came from a health and wellness conversation, I think, beforehand, right?
I couldn't do this job if it weren't for yoga.
Thank you. Okay, so, but being able to get the creativity flowing, think if you're planning the sessions, be able to think about different options for people. And that's why I love this, whether it's music, whether it's writing, or I love an old typewriter, having something to do that gets you thinking creatively, whether it's painting, games, Scrabble, or whatever else, whether it is crayons. I have to say, and I'm going to give shout out to Heuristica. It's a law firm here in Toronto. Has anybody seen this before? So this is one of the greatest takeaway packages, and I wanted to bring it in today because, first of all, they are a litigation-related firm. The bag is really cute. Evidence, chain of custody. It looks like something that you would use for evidence. Then there are these little coloring pages. Now, some of them I agree with. Lawyer, but only because superhero is not the job title. If it takes 3 years to get there, it better be one hell of a bar. A litigator, lawyers have feelings too, allegedly. So different funny little things that people have. And then they also included a pack of crayons. So I think being able to access the creative elements of individuals during a strategic planning meeting is really, really important. Find a way to do that so that they could engage appropriately. But as they're doing that as well, you need to think about getting through the agenda, respecting people's time at all times, and be inclusive in the conversation. So we talked about inclusivity in the pre-planning phase, but being inclusive in the participation. If there are quieter people, get their input. Find ways to get their input, whether it's small groups, whether it's leading conversations differently. Let me ask, on the creativity part, at different meetings, whether they're strategic planning retreats or other meetings, what's been the most creative activity that you've engaged in? I always look for suggestions. So things that you've done that's worked really well, or things that you never want to do again. That's fine too.
I had a budget retreat recently, and we all made tacos together after we kind of really went through like the nuts and bolts of like boring stuff. They did it right. We kind of scheduled it to be right before dinner, and then we all made tacos together.
I love that.
Kind of just, it was a nice kind of, everybody's hands were busy and we were all chit-chatting, so it felt like a nice brain switch.
Yeah, I love that. So cooking, that's one of the things I couldn't get onto this picture. Cooking is really good, and being able to
it's
sort
small,
of...
so I guess, you know.
Absolutely. At the previous one, a similar thing, that they made dinner together is something that came up. What about others? Just curious, what's worked, yeah?
I remember being at a conference where there was Lego on the table and they wanted you to build things.
Yep. How many, I'm curious, how many would roll their eyes seeing Lego on the table, or plasticine, or you don't have to admit to rolling your eyes, but again, for some people that works and for some people that doesn't work. But again, being able to, it does two things. Your hands are otherwise occupied with Lego. Most people like putting things together, and the creative juices are flowing because all of a sudden, ooh, what am I going to make out of it? Okay. How about retreats that you've been to? I'm just curious, what kind of, or other meetings?
Geez, I don't know, but I like the cooking class idea.
Okay.
So I'll let somebody else talk about
All right.
that idea.
You know, I've done word puzzles before. You know what? Find this word, or find that word, or can you find that word?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember one. So they had these tables set up like this, and like each was a different topic, and people got to go from one topic to the next. And the idea was you work together and go to the table you want to go to and come up with a plan for implementing that idea.
I like that. Okay, fantastic. So there's different things that you can do to get the creative juices flowing. Is that a hand up? Yep. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. You actually did an escape room as a retreat?
No, but I know somebody who did.
Okay, I love it.
And they use some of the problem-solving things as part of their team building to get their creative juices.
For the retreat. I love that. That's a really good idea. How many of you have been in meetings where you've used, and they're in there as well, sticky notes? Right? Okay, so many of you have done the sticky notes, and so I've added a sticky note pack for each of you, because you're, being able to, different colored sticky notes on the walls, on papers, is really a good way of getting people engaged, getting them up, off, out of their seats, and doing things if they can. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. The last thing that I want, and I've got 4 minutes, I think, to get through this with everybody. So we've gotten through the planning phase, we've gotten through the day, and people end there, and people think, okay, that's done. The one thing that I would say because we've mentioned the sticky notes, for those of you who've been to meetings where there's sticky notes on the walls or on the boards, what happens to those sticky notes? Thank you. Very important, take pictures of them, because somebody will inevitably take the white paper and roll it up with the sticky notes and put it in their trunk and then forget it, or not know where it is, or it's gone off somewhere else, or it just gets left back in the room. Take pictures of the whiteboard or wherever you have ideas that have been generated. Take photos of it. That is part of your now post-retreat follow-up and action. Once you've done the pictures and you're back in your respective offices, I often say don't forget to celebrate the retreat, because it takes a lot to plan, it takes a lot to do. People are engaged, so whether you're celebrating and honoring the person who has created the retreat or everybody who has participated in the retreat, take some time to celebrate the fact that you achieved that goal of completing a planning retreat, completing and facilitating a planning retreat. But then, secure the feedback. Find out what worked, what didn't work, right? Get the input from people so that you know what to do again, what not to do again. You might have thought the taco class was great, but if 10 out of the 11 people said not that great, let's think about what else we can do. And I think the idea of making tacos is great, but get the feedback from people. When you can, take the sticky notes hopefully you've had a note taker, and that's why I'm curious how you incorporate your collection of data afterwards. Do you have a designated note taker at your event? Okay,
Yeah,
so there are.
Of a note taker.
Good.
We created a report.
Good.
Sent that out to all the participants, had them review it, comment, got it back, and then a report was generated for the board to review and in essence approve.
So just for the benefit of those who are listening or watching, getting a note taker, being able to collect the information, creating the report, sending it out for initial review and feedback before finalizing it and moving it out. You've just sort of done the last little mile, so I'm not going to go over it. What I would say is, as part of that strategic planning report that you do, ensure that there's an appropriate scorecard, right? Ensure that there's an appropriate timeline and actionable items for people to know what they're doing, when they have to do it by. And that's one of the reasons why Smarties are in there. Apart from the treat part, SMART goals. Make sure, and everybody knows what SMART goals, so I won't go into what that conversation is. But ensure that they are things that are realistic and that are reasonable for people to get done in the timeline that you've said. And once you have finalized it, then circulate it to your external and internal stakeholders. Don't forget the externals that might need to see your strategic plan as well. There might be others who are affiliated or associated that will benefit from the planning that you've done as you move forward. And the last thing that sometimes gets forgotten, and I'll just state this, is establish as part of that whole process periodic reviews. So whether it's a 6-month review, whether it's a 1-year review, depending on how long your strategic plan has been for, establish periodic reviews to go in, check it out, review it. Are you on track? Do you have to pivot? Do you have to do some changes? And that might be part of the review process as well. Permission to pivot as necessary. And with that, I think we're at 4:46. I've gone 1 minute over. You can all just breathe again and enjoy your next hour. Any questions? Thank you. All right.